If you have your Bible, turn to Matthew chapter 2. We're continuing our series on Christmas declarations, and we've been talking about the fact that the Lord has something to say to us at Christmas that goes beyond even the fact that we recognize the real meaning, which is the birth of Jesus, but that it has significance that is even greater than that. And that is, last week we talked about the virgin birth, and we talked about how that is the declaration of Christmas, that nothing is too hard for God. That whatever we're walking through, the encouragement to us is that whatever we're walking through, whatever we may be facing in life, we can be encouraged because nothing is too hard for the Lord Jesus. No trouble, no trial, no sickness, no problem, no person. Nothing is beyond his ability. It's kind of like, when Mary was confused at what the angel Gabriel was saying to her, and she had this disturbed sense that she didn't know what he was saying. How was he saying this? How is this going to even come to pass? The angel Gabriel says to her, he says, all things are possible with God. And I would say that to you. All things are possible with God. Christmas is that first reminder, the first declaration, that with God, nothing is too hard. All things are possible. Today we're going to talk about the second Christmas declaration, and that is the declaration that God is near. That God is always near. That God is near. Would you say that with me? God is near. He is always near. He is always present. Matthew chapter 2, we're going to be reading the story about the wise men. I love the story of the wise men. Beautiful story. In fact, I was thinking about the program that this little country church was having about the wise men and the Christmas program, and they were having the program, and all the kids were going to have parts, Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, and the three wise men were going to be played by three brothers. So the last night of the rehearsal, the pastor had told all the kids, he says, all right, guys, be back tomorrow. He says, I want you to dress authentic. Country church, out in the backwoods. And so anyway, long story short, the pastor's at the door welcoming the kids as they're coming in. He's looking at their costumes and checking them all out. And all of a sudden, here comes the three boys that are supposed to be the wise men. They're wearing rain jackets, got helmets on, and they're dragging a water hose behind them. And he looked at the boys. He said, guys, he said, you're supposed to be dressed authentic. You're supposed to be wise men and not firemen. And they said, well, he said, we are wise men. Our daddy said that the wise men came from afar. The story out of the King James is they came from afar. That's the word, A-F-A-R. Yeah, you read it later. They come from afar. Like that. Of course, one of my favorite ones is the three boys that are playing the part of the wise men, the kids' Christmas program, and the first little boy comes up and got his gift, and he kneels down and he says, gold. Places it down. Second little boy comes up and he's got his gift and he puts it down and he says, myrrh. The third little boy, he comes up and he has his gift and he looks at him and he says, Frank sent this. It's frankincense, but to a little kid, it sounded like Frank sent this. I like it. God is always near. Will you say that again? God is near. God is always near. He is always present in our lives. He's always working in our lives, even when we don't feel him. Even when we don't sense him. Even when you don't feel like there's no way that God is in this. I don't feel it. I don't feel him. I don't sense him. I don't hear him. God is always near. He's near when things are going well and when things are in chaos. He's near when we're in times of peace or we're in times of war. He's near when we feel like we're on top of the mountain and everything's going well, or we're in the valley and it feels like all is going to hell. God is always near. God is always present. And that's what Christmas declares, that God is forever in our lives. He is always near to us. He is our Emmanuel. Matthew chapter 2, it says this. It says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. And about that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. And he called a meeting of the leading priests and the teachers of religious law and asked, he says, "Where's the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem, Judea," they said. Skipping down to verse 7, then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. And then he told them, he says, "You go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so I can go and worship him too." And after this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. And they entered the house, and they saw the child with his mother Mary. And they bowed down and they worshiped him. And then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. If I could read the portion of scripture that we read last week talking about nothing is too hard for God, I would read Isaiah 7:14 again. When the Lord himself, he says, "I will give you the sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel," which means God with us. See, I love the story of the wise men. I love the picture that it paints in our imaginations, because we can imagine this star shining brightly in the heavens that literally is leading the wise men across long, great distances until finally we imagine it coming over the stable where the Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus are, and it just seems like it radiates this light down upon it like a spotlight. We imagine Mary being inside that stable, and she's looking so wonderfully beautiful as she's got this glow about her because she's got this love for this newborn baby son, Jesus. We imagine Joseph standing right beside her, and he's holding that shepherd's staff, and he's looking strong and brave and gentle. We imagine, the shepherds with their long beards and their tattered clothes, and we imagine that the sheep are over here, and there's a cow over here, maybe some chickens running around, and then we see them. We see them in our mind's eye, these three regal individuals, royal robes, immaculate crowns, dismounting off of their camels and coming and bowing before the baby Jesus, extending their arms and giving him these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. See, that's how we envision this story that we read about. That's how it paints in our minds. In fact, most nativity says if you have one at home, it'll have every one of those things I just said. Mary and Joseph, the baby Jesus, the shepherds, some sheep, some cows, and then it'll have those three individuals, the wise men, the gifts of gold. See, that's why we have it. Pageants have it, Christmas programs have it. In fact, when we were in Branson, Missouri over Thanksgiving, we got to go again and see at the Sight and Sound Theater this beautiful story. It's called The Christmas Story, the story of Mary and Joseph and the nativity, the birth of Jesus. And that's exactly how they portray it. It's choreographed gorgeously. You got Mary and Joseph, the baby Jesus. You've got shepherds. You've got sheep. And then all of a sudden, here they came in, these three men, long trains, colorful, beautiful, and they come and they present their gifts. That's how it's presented because, friends, that's how we see it. We like to put them all together. This one perfect, picturesque setting of all of them in one singular place that came to Bethlehem. But here's the problem with that. The problem is that it actually didn't happen that way at all. The wise men did not arrive on Christmas Day like the shepherds did. They did not find Jesus lying in a manger. They didn't find him in the stable. In fact, when they finally get there, Jesus is living with his parents, Mary and Joseph, in a temporary home until they finally will flee to Egypt. Then the truth is that when we read the story about the wise men, we don't really know how many there were. We just like to assume three because there was three gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But there could have been 5, there could have been a dozen. See, all we really know about these guys is that they came from eastern lands. They came and they found the baby Jesus. They presented him with these special gifts and they worshiped him. That's all we know about them. We have 12 verses out of Matthew 2 about these men, and there's nothing more because after this, we never hear from these guys ever again. If they went home and wrote a book about it, we never hear about it because that book doesn't exist. If they went and they started telling everybody they met about it, and they went from city to city, nation to nation, telling about the story of the new king, we have no idea. No one knows for sure. We like to imagine that they did. We like to think if we would have seen the new baby, if we would have met him and we would have presented him with gifts, that we would have, for the rest of our lives, told indelibly so many people about this encounter that we had. But we have no idea. All we know is that they saw a star. They recognized it as having significance. And then they followed it until they found Jesus. You know, I've read this story hundreds of times. And a lot of times we find ourselves, when we first read this story, the thing that we like to focus on is the star. We think about the star, but the reality is that the star is not the star of the story. The star is just a part of it. The real star is these men. It's these men who recognize what God had placed in the sky as a sign from God. They realized that it had purpose and significance, and then they followed it until they found Jesus. Listen, there's so much of this story that we don't know. We don't know what the star was. We don't know when it appeared and when it disappeared. We don't know how many wise men there were. We have no idea what these guys were going through when they come to find Jesus. All we know is that they came. They were people like us. They were men that were susceptible to the frailties and prejudices of life. Men that I believe that were looking to the heavens, asking God for some kind of a sign. And God gave them what they needed when he gave them a star that pointed them to Jesus. You see, that's what I get when I read Matthew chapter 2. Where the story of Mary and Joseph and the virgin birth was a sign of that nothing is too hard for God. The story of the wise men and the star that's shown in the heavens is God's sign to the world that he is always near, that he is always present, that he is always at work in our lives. He's trying to lead us to a place where we will have an encounter with him. See, that's what this story says to me. It says that to me that when I find myself looking to the heavens or looking to God for a sign of his presence, that he will always answer me. Because why? Because God's ultimate goal in every single one of our lives is to get us to a place where we'll have an encounter with him. That's God's design. Listen, the Bible calls them wise men. Other translations calls them magi. Why? Because they were men who studied the stars. But in reading this, I'm wondering to myself if they were looking to the stars not because they were astronomers, but if they were looking to the stars because of what was going on in their world. Looking into the stars because they needed some kind of an answer for the situation they found themselves in. Listen, the Bible is filled with stories of people who were facing life situations and they were seeking God for a sign of his presence, just like a lot of us. I'd ask for a raise of hands, but I can guarantee you that there's a lot of people in this room who have probably asked God, God, just give me a sign. God, just show me. Just give me something that lets me know that you're in this or you're not in this or you're going to lead me this way or that. I just need a sign of your presence. I think all of us can probably, in some way or another, we can say, I understand this, because that's what I see when I read this story. When we're in need of a sign from God, we just need to know that God is with us, that God always comes at the right time. See, I'm wondering when I read about these wise men in chapter 2, were they looking to the heavens for a sign for God because of something they were walking in? And then at just the right moment, and in just the right way, God gives them the sign of his presence by giving them a star for them to see. Listen, I'm convinced that every single day, in a million different ways, that God is trying to make himself known, that God is trying to speak to us, that he's trying to let us all know that we are never by ourselves, that we are never alone, that God is always near, that he's always with us. That it's the fulfillment of Isaiah 7:14. He is our Emmanuel, that he is God with us. He is the promise that Jesus gave in Matthew 28:20 when he says, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you, but I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Our problem is that we're not always listening, or we're not always looking. Therefore, we're not seeing when he's trying to speak to us. I heard the story about the mom and dad that were riding the train with their little daughter back when trains were the normal mode of transportation. Going to have a train station here tonight. But trains were the normal mode of transportation. They were riding this train. It was one of those, it was an overnight trip, and so they had the sleeper cars. And so it was getting late. It was time to all get in their beds. And so the parents told their daughters, they said, we're going to let you sleep in the upper bunk. She says, that way you'll be closer to God, and God will watch over you. So they put her in the upper bunk. They got in their bunks, and other people got in the sleeper car, got in their bunks. And so the train's just chugging along. And as it's going on, all of a sudden the little girl says in a whisper, she says, Mama, are you there? It's all dark in the car, and Mama answers back, yes, sweetie, I'm here. A little bit later, she says a little bit louder, Daddy, are you there? Daddy says, yes, baby, Daddy's here. She does this several times. Mommy, I get louder every time, Daddy, until finally one of the other guys that is sleeping in the car, that same sleeper car, his patience is fed up, and he said, yes, they're all here. Your mama, your daddy, your sisters, your brothers, your aunties, your cousins, they're all here. Now go to bed so we can get some sleep. A few minutes go by, and then all of a sudden she says, Mama, was that God? God is always near. Say that with me again. God is always near. And in every day and in every way, he's trying to make himself known. The problem is that we're not recognizing his voice. We're not recognizing his presence. Why? Because we're not looking in the right places. We're not looking in the right direction. I think about the prophet Elijah. After he had this encounter on Mount Carmel, the Bible says that he's now fleeing for his life because Jezebel, the queen, has issued for his capture and his execution. So he's fleeing and he's trying to hide out. And the Bible says he comes to this place that he's just literally says, I just want to die. It's not worth living. The Bible says that God sends angels to minister to him. He feeds him and he gives him something to drink. He gives him time to rest. Why? Because he's trying to building up enough strength within him because God wants to take Elijah to where he wants him to be. And where's that? It's at Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And then we get to 1 Kings 19, verses 8 and 9, and that's where he's at. He's now in this cave, and he's in this cave, and all of a sudden God begins to speak to him. You go read all the story later, but I want you to hear what God says to him. He's brought him all this place, and finally he gets him here, and this is what he says, beginning at verse 11. He says to Elijah, he says, go out and stand before me on the mountain, the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. So the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and he went out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. And the voice says, what are you doing here, Elijah? The point I was simply making is that sometimes we're looking for God to have this huge sign. God, do something spectacular. Write my name in the clouds so I know it's you. When God is coming to us every day in the mode of a whisper. We're looking for some big, earth-shattering, transformative kind of sign when God is just simply in the everyday things. And every day, in every way, God is coming to us. I think about what the Apostle Paul writes in Romans chapter 1. He says that nature itself is declaring the power and the presence of God. He says we're just missing it. In fact, it says in verse 20, for ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. What Paul is saying here is that every day and in every way, God is declaring, even through creation, that he's present, that he's with us. He's whispering in our ears that he's present. He's our Emmanuel. He's God with us. We're just missing it. It's the poem that Oliver Holden wrote back in the 19th century that says, those who seek the throne of grace find that throne in every place. If we live a life of prayer, God is present everywhere. In our sickness and our health, in our want and our wealth. If we look to God in prayer, God is present everywhere. When our earthly comforts fail, when the woes of life prevail, this is a time for earnest prayer, for God is present everywhere. Then my soul in every strait, to thy Father come and wait. He will answer every prayer, for God is present everywhere. He is our Emmanuel. He's God with us. Near to the hurting, near to the brokenhearted, near to those who are hungry, near to those who are in need, near to those who need wisdom, near to those who need guidance and direction, near to those who just long to be in his presence. He is always near. Always. Think about a story from Dr. Tony Campolo's own life. He shares about growing up in West Philadelphia. He says when he was a little boy going to elementary school, he would walk to school, and he said his mom had paid a teenage girl to walking back and forth to school, and she would give her a nickel a day. This is back in the 40s. Give her a nickel every day just to walking back and forth to school. Well, He decided, I'm big enough, I can take myself to school. So he says to his mom, Mom, if you'll just give me a nickel a week, I'll walk myself back and forth to school. I'll be very careful. I won't talk to strangers. I'll keep focused. He says, you can keep the other 20 cents for yourself. He says, that way it'll work out for both of us. So finally, he talked her into it. Walk himself to school. He did that all the way through second, third grade, for like 3 years, he said. Years later, he's a grown man. They had a family gathering, and he's telling his siblings, telling the family, he said, when I was a big kid growing up, he said, I walked myself back and forth to school by myself. And his mama started laughing. He says, why are you laughing? She said, you really think you walked yourself to school? He says, yeah. She says, you didn't walk yourself to school by yourself. She says, every morning for 3 years, when you would walk out that door, I walked right behind you. I followed you all the way till you walked into that school. He says, when you got out of school at 3:30 and you started walking home, he says, you didn't see me because I kept myself hidden from you. She says, I was always right there behind you. She says, I just wanted to be near. And friends, that's God. God is always near. You don't walk out your door by yourself. You don't get in your car and get on 45 freeway by yourself. You don't go to work. You don't go to bed. There's nowhere you go that God is not there. David said in the Bible, he says, if I made my bed in hell or I made my bed in the heavens, he said, God is always near. He's always present in our lives. It's the prayer of St. Patrick. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts and all that love me. Listen, Hebrews 13:5 says this of the Lord, He will never fail us or abandon us. He's always near. That's what the author Diane Moody once said. For you and me, just knowing His presence is all around us can help lift us from the darkest night, embrace us in the loneliest hour, give us strength when we are tempted, and enable us to live confident and secure in His promises. Listen, I think the wise men were watching the heavens for a sign of God's presence because why? Because they were walking through something. They needed God to give them a sign of His presence, and God gave them one because He gave them a star. And Christmas, friends, it is our forever reminder that God is present. He's present for those who are hungry for His presence. He is present for those that are looking for Him to be near. Why? Because He is. And the birth of Jesus, our Emmanuel, is heaven's declaring to all of us that we will never leave us and He'll never forsake us. But He is always near to us. See, the star and the wise men, they saw it and they recognized God is near. But it's also beyond that. Not only a sign that He is near, it's a sign that He is near to give us some direction. I think one of the hallmark scriptures of my own personal life is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all that you do, and He will show you which path to take. You see, in the midst of whatever was taking place in these wise men's lives, when they saw the star, they not only recognized it as a sign of God's presence, but they also realized that God was giving them some direction as well. And so without delay, they mounted their camels and they hit the road. They didn't take it to committee. They didn't spend much trying to analyze the brilliance of the star, if this was something going to be really unique or not. I think that they saw it, they understood it, and then they realized that God was leading them to a place where they were going to find the answer to their greatest need, leading to the place where they would find the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords that would meet not only their need, but the need of all of humanity. Lead them to Jesus. So these guys put everything in their lives on hold until they could find Him. They didn't know where the star would lead. They didn't know how long it was going to take. They simply recognized that God's doing something here, so they rearranged their schedules. They got somebody else to water the plants. They got somebody else to feed the dog, and they set out to go and find the newborn king. See, Matthew 2:2 says this. When they were speaking to King Herod, they said, where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him. We've come to have an encounter with him. And then in verse 9 down through verse 11, After the interview, they went their way, and the star they had seen guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them, stopped over the place where the child was. Then when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They recognized the presence of God. And they entered the house. They saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Listen, God is speaking to us. He's giving us signs of his presence. And what is he wanting to do? He wants us to lead us to a place where we can have an encounter with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, where we can have an encounter with Jesus Christ. That's what he's doing. For all of us, he's leading us to that place. The question we have is, are we looking for him and are we seeking after him? See, I believe the main reason the wise men recognized the uniqueness of the star and understood how to follow it is because they were already seeking God for something in their lives. Listen, everything around us cries out, look to God. Everything declares, look to Jesus. Everything is saying around us, seek and you'll find him. Christmas trees, the Christmas lights, the poinsettias, the gifts, the stars in heaven, nature itself, it's all declaring the same thing. It's all pointing to God. They're all signs of his presence, and they're all pointing to Jesus. Why? So that we can find him. So we can have an encounter with him. But so many times in the busyness and the chaos of life, we fail to see the signs, and we miss finding him, even at Christmas when everything is supposed to point to him. I do know what it says in Jeremiah 29:13. It says, if you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. The New King James says, you will seek me, you will find me when you search for me with all of your heart. In the middle of the night, at the emergency room, on the freeway and stop and go traffic, at work, at the bank, in the kitchen, at the grocery store, at the funeral home, when you're stuck in a meeting and you're trying to make a decision, if you'll seek him, you'll find him. If you're searching for a sign of his presence, he's there. And he's saying, just look to Jesus. He's the answer. See, God will give you a sign, not just for a sign's sake, but God will give you a sign so you'll understand that he is there and Jesus is with you. I'm closing with this. I shared this story lots of times, but it's so poignant and it speaks to the reality of who God is. It's a story of the pastor who was in Colorado skiing. And as he was skiing, he kept noticing every day there was a group of skiers that had red vests on. He didn't understand, why are they wearing red vests? And so he thought, I'm going to ski by them. I'm going to check it out for myself. And he skied near them one day, and he saw that on the back of the red vest, it said this, blind skier. And it baffled him because he couldn't understand how can somebody be blind skiing? Because when you can see good, sometimes skiing's difficult enough. And it didn't make sense. How can you be blind and still ski? And yet he would see them. So he wanted to ask. And so later in the day, when he saw one of the instructors, he skied over. He says, just tell me. He says, how is this possible? How are you skiing? How do they even do it? And the instructor told him this. He said, every blind skier has a guide. They'll either ski beside them, in front of them, and behind them. And he says, and they're communicating with them the whole time. He says they communicate in two ways. He says, one, they clank their poles together just so they'll know where they're at around them, their nearness. He says, and then they listen, and then they'll speak out, and they'll say, turn left, move right, skier coming up, slow down. And he says, in that way, he says, there's no mountain they cannot ski. Friends, I want to tell you right now, God is always near. God with us, God for us, God in us. He's beside us. He's our Emmanuel. If we'll listen for the poles of his presence that are clanking all around us, we'll see God's here. He's here. He's here. He's here. He's with us. And if we'll listen closely, he'll guide us to that place where we need to be. Because all roads lead to Jesus. And Jesus, friends, in your life, it makes all the difference. God's presence. God is always near. He's our Emmanuel. See, these wise men in Matthew chapter 2, they saw his star. They understood it for what it meant. It was a sign from God. And it led them until they found Jesus. In essence, they caught a glimpse of his presence. And it changed their forever. Friends, if you'll get a glimpse of his presence, let him bring you to his son Jesus. He'll change you forever. I don't know what happened to them after they left. I know this, they were never the same. Because you can't meet Jesus and be the same. Really meet him. You can't meet Jesus and bow before him and not be changed forever. See, Christmas is making some declarations. It's the birth of Jesus, the Son of God, who in a few months when we get to Easter, we'll celebrate his death, his burial, and his resurrection. But Christmas is the moment when God sent the light into the darkness, and it penetrated the darkness and brought life and change. But through Christmas, God is making declarations also, universally for all of us. One, nothing's too hard. And two, he is always near. And friends, if you'll remember that he's always near, then you can grab a hold of that nothing's too hard because of Jesus. Stand together. Father, I love you. I thank you, Lord, for your word. Lord, you know all of us in this room. God, some of us today are in desperate need of a sign of your presence. Some of us may be battling some sickness. Some of us may be making some decisions at home, at work, at business, in life. I don't know what we're walking through today, but I know this. You are here. You are present. If we'll open up our eyes and look, we'll see you all around us. If we'll open up our ears and listen, we'll hear you whispering. All roads lead to you, Jesus. And we'll find you. Oh, what a change. The answer to whatever we need is in you. I love you, God. I want to open up these altars. I want to give us a chance to come and pray. Some of you, I can guarantee you needed to hear this because of what you're walking through today. I want you to find a place of prayer. Spend some time. You can do it at your seat. You can come kneel around the side. The program's going to be tonight. It's going to be fun. It's going to be festive. We're going to have a great time. But for now, right now, just to get alone by yourself with the Lord and say, okay, God, I'm listening. I'm looking to you. Can we do that? Can we do that? We love you. God bless you. Next week, my last one before we celebrate Christmas. Don't miss it. Amen. Pastor Steve.
Emmanuel,